I won't run from the crushing. I'll hold on through the pain. What I lose means nothing next to what I gain. Come tear down every idol so this heart won't stray. Don't let me stray. I just wanna be your sanctuary, a dwelling place for grace and mercy. Keep sifting me till.
Boker Tov, welcome to the Threshing Floor here on LambNetwork.tv. Where we discuss all things pertaining to the scriptures and what can be trusted and what can't be, what is true and what is not. The threshing floor was a place where they divided the wheat and the chaff. And that is what we are here to do today as well. And we do so every week. And I want to thank everybody for joining us. It is good for you to be here today. Thank you so much. Something that I wanted to address, because I think it's a really, really critical issue right now, is this whole idea of whether there is any such thing as Judeo-Christian values. It is something that we have been taught about for, of course, many years. We've always been taught that North America was established on Judeo-Christian values. And there's a lot of people who are now saying, well, there isn't really such a thing. So the first person to use the term, interestingly enough, was George Orwell, author of 1984, An Animal Farm, and other dystopian novels. And the idea was that he was trying to explain the foundations of Western morality. So now, I don't believe George Orwell was a Christian by any stretch of the imagination, but this concept that Judaism and Christianity were one, and that our foundation is based on it. Well, you've now got a lot of people who are coming out and saying there isn't any such thing, and in fact, Judaism and Christianity have nothing to do with each other. And how they deal with this, or how they prove this, is they will quote some verses from the Talmud which denigrate Gentile people. So for those who don't know, what is the Talmud? The Talmud is a set of commentaries. It's actually 23 volumes. There's two Talmuds. There's the Babylonian Talmud and there's the Jerusalem one. The Babylonian one is the bigger one and is much more commonly used. I actually have a translation here on my shelf down below. And if anybody ever has trouble sleeping, let me know and I will send you a copy of one of the books, and that should take care of that in probably about 2.5 minutes. But what is it? What are these 23 volumes? Well, what they are is commentary on the Torah. And so what it is a bunch of opinions by different rabbis on how to keep the commandments. That's the essence of it. So you have the command in the Shabbat, in the Torah, not to work on the Shabbat. Well, there is a whole volume on Shabbat alone, and it's got to be at least 500 pages on what constitutes work. And in the Talmud, you actually have 39 classifications of work. You can't knit two stitches together. You can, I mean, there's all kinds of things that define work, because the way the Jewish community looks at the Torah and the philosophy, certainly amongst the Orthodox, is that God gave us the commandments and then left it up to us to figure out what to do with it, which is true to a degree, except that what they then believe is that the Talmud actually has higher standing than the Torah. So if they have a choice, if you look at the Chabad Lubavitch community, which is a group of ultra-Orthodox people that came originally, Lubavitch was a town in Russia, pre-communist Russia. And the rabbi there, the Baal Shem Tov, who is the founder of the Chabad movement, the master of a great name, and it's one of the fastest growing segments of Judaism in the world, because they're very spiritual. They do believe in ecstatic experiences, because rabbinic Judaism had become like a dried up tree at some point. And then all of a sudden, this rabbi gets an experience with God. Now, obviously, if it's not Yeshua, then we cannot claim it is literally from God. But what essentially he said was that you could have a relationship with God and not go through the rabbis, which was heresy. I mean, it's the same thing as the Catholic Church. And the reason why the Catholic Church was so hostile against Protestantism is because they said you don't have to go through the priest to get to God. And they had kind of cornered the market, as it were, on this. So even though the Chabad movement is one of the fastest growing in Judaism today, for a long time it was persecuted. And those who practiced it were not looked on too kindly. So you have this movement, and the Talmud is really this commentary by all these different rabbis explaining how we keep the commandments. And so you'll have sometimes even differing opinions, but the prevailing thought is that we need help in understanding how to walk this out. So if God gives us a commandment, we need the rabbi's help in understanding how to keep the commandment. We can't just be left up to our own devices. We need some help by these great sages. I remember when my mom was dying of cancer. She passed away in 2000, so 25 years ago. And before she died, she actually worked for a yeshiva, an ultra-Orthodox Hebrew school. And the principal of the school, his wife, was good friends with my mother. And the rabbi's wife would come over, and while my mom was battling cancer, she would try to help her with her spirituality, because my mom was about as spiritual as a fence post. She had no concept of God, really didn't really care. I remember 2 weeks before she died, I was in her room, and I kind of had my arms wrapped around her. And I was trying to talk to her, because I had already become a believer at that point. And I was trying to talk to her about a relationship with God and through Yeshua. And I said, aren't you worried about where you're going after this? She says, I don't think I'm going anywhere after this. She did not believe in the afterlife. But this rabbi's wife would come over, and she was trying to help my mom and encourage her and stuff like that. And I remember one time she's telling her how to light the Shabbat candles. And she was saying that, well, you got to do it before sundown, but, but she was talking about this instance that if you had to go out for whatever reason after you lit the Shabbat candles, that there was this way that you would light two of them, but not. And I'm listening to her. And finally I asked her, I said, who tells you these things? And she just looked at me with all sincerity. She said, oh, some very smart people. And I thought, good grief. I don't know who you think these smart people are, but I didn't think that they really had a grasp on the truth. Because, and here's the way that I describe rabbinic Judaism. You've got 10,000 rules and 20,000 ways of getting around them. This is what rabbinic Judaism, Orthodox Judaism today is really all about. You've got rules upon rules upon rules. You've got bondage. You've got this oppression. You've got all of these laws that we have to abide by. And yet there's all these ways of going around them. We're not to cut the corner of our beards, it says in the Torah. And I really wrestled with this years back because I wanted to know, I didn't think that God wanted us to look like someone who just walked out of the bush or was living on the street or something like that. But so I wanted to know what it meant. And I finally came across an article, and I've long since lost it. I wish I could find it again. But what the author said is that when it said to harm the corner of our beards, it meant to shave it right off. It's not that we're not to trim it, but that we're not to cut it right down. So we're not to be clean shaven, was the essence of what the article said. And that made more sense to me. Because you see that within when David sent counselors to Harun, the son of Nahash of the Ammonites, and to comfort him after his father's death, his counselors, Harun's counselors, humiliated David's emissaries. And it says that they cut their clothes and also they shaved their beards off. And it was a disgrace. So what the rabbis do with this is that they, instead of cutting the beard, what they'll do is, the reason why you'll see a lot of Orthodox rabbis have all these misshapen beards, they'll burn it. So even though it says not to harm it, they look at the word cut. So therefore, as long as I don't use a blade, I'm okay. And it's this whole manipulation thing. We think that we're faking God out, is what they're doing. God said to do this, but if I do this, I can still get away with it. And that's, by the way, what a lot of Christians practice too. So this whole idea, why am I explaining all this? Because I want to help you to understand what the Talmud is. But there's a lot of verses within the Talmud that now that those who are against Israel are grabbing onto, and they are using as proof that Judaism and Christianity are not the same thing. So I'll give you a few of them. The Talmud is in fact anti-Christian and anti-Yeshua, and also there's a lot of passages in there that are anti-Gentile. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Those who do good to the Akum, referring to the Gentiles, will not rise from the dead. So if you bless a Gentile person, you will not experience the resurrection. Another verse says, do not say anything in praise of them, lest it be said how good that goy is. So you're not to praise the Gentiles at all. In the Talmud, Yeshua is ignominiously called Yeshu, which means may his name and memory be blotted out. The difference between Yeshu and Yeshua is Yeshua actually means our salvation. Another verse says, the life of a goy and all his physical powers belong to a Jew. So almost like Highlander, that his life force is mine and I can do. So I can essentially, what they're saying is that you can use a Gentile in order to get what you want, kind of like the Matrix. Put the Gentile in a pod and then suck out his life force. There's another verse that says it is permitted to deceive a goy. It's okay to deceive and perjure yourself when dealing with a Gentile, so you can lie in court. Heretics, traitors, and apostates are to be thrown into a well and not rescued. So what is an apostate? It is someone who doesn't believe in the God of Israel, including those who believe in Yeshua, because they do not look at Yeshua as God, and therefore that is blasphemy. That is what they believe is that believing in Yeshua is paganism, polytheism, because they look at it as being more than one God. The Talmud leads Jews away from the Messiah. There's no question about that. Mary is referred to as a prostitute, and there's a story about a Jewish convert raising historical figures from the dead using necromancy. And there's even a passage within the Talmud that says that Yeshua says himself that his punishment in the afterlife for leading Israel astray is to boil in excrement. So you can imagine why there is this if you're going to look at those verses alone and say this represents Judaism, then of course Judaism and Christianity have nothing in common with one another. I agree. But here's a couple of questions that we need to ask when we're dealing with this. And I've seen this question asked to both Charlie Kirk and to Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro, of course, and Ben Shapiro is actually quite supportive of dialogue between Jews and Christians. He has interviewed many pastors on his show. He interviewed John MacArthur. He interviewed William Lane Craig, who was a contributor to Lee Strobel's the Case for Christ theologian. He has interviewed Vodi Bakum, who just passed away last week. He also interviewed Rabbi Zacharias, who, of course, before the scandal came out, was well-renowned and a brilliant theologian. There's no question that Rabbi really could defend the scriptures and argue them very well. And it's a real tragedy as to what happened to him after his death. But so Ben Shapiro is not anti-Christianity by any stretch of the imagination. He doesn't believe in Yeshua, but he's not hostile. Charlie Kirk, of course, being a Christian, and I remember seeing this one video where at his debates, someone came up and challenged him and said, "I'm a Christian. Well, how can you support Israel and how can you support Christian or this idea of Judeo-Christian values when you've got these verses?" Well, here's how I would answer this. Number one, is there an element of Jewish supremacy, meaning that Jews think that they are better than everybody else? Of course there are. Every single people in the world, every single people group in the world, every single religion in the world views itself as supreme. Now, what makes Jews a little different, what makes Judaism different, is Judaism is both a religion and a race. And in fact, it's also a nation. And it's the only one in the world that is that. Islam is not a group of people and it doesn't have a nation. But the Jewish people are God's covenant people, children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And when God said that he was going to make a great nation out of Abraham, you need two things. You need people and you need land. So Jews and Judaism are unique in the world in that. And so are there elements of Jewish supremacy in the world? Of course there are. And I remember years ago, I've probably shared this story on this broadcast in the past. And if I have, indulge me, that I was back in 2001. I was at Moody Bible Institute in Chicago, and we were doing an outreach in New York City. So we were training there on how to share the gospel with Jewish people, and I was at the time affiliated with Chosen People Ministries, and they had put on this program every year. And so my roommate was this young Russian pastor from Omaha, Nebraska. He was like 23 years old. I was 31 at the time. And he asked me in our room one night, he said, do Jews think that they are better than everybody else? And I thought it was an interesting question. And I said, well, in fact, they do. And he got really animated about that, and of course, indignant, and said, well, how can that be? And it's wrong. And I said, well, number one, first of all, I don't subscribe to that view. I mean, scripture's clear that God did not choose the Jewish people for any reason of themselves, but because he decided to make a choice, and Abraham was it. And so there's no superiority of the Jewish people vis-a-vis our standing before God. All are sinners that need to be saved. But I said, if you have to look at it from my people's perspective, if you had every nation in the world that was trying to exterminate you at one point in time, and you can go back through history and make a good claim for this, you would probably think that you were better than everybody else too. And what was really ironic is that the very next day in our class, we were studying Jewish history and all the pogroms and the persecution that the Jewish people have experienced throughout the past, 2,000 years pertaining to Christianity. So, although it's not a right view, it's understandable that Jews would think that they are better than other people because nobody else likes us. We have every nation in the world that's rising up against us and trying to get rid of us. I mean, we've been kicked out of every country in Europe. The Arab nations, of course, kicked out. I mean, we're talking, here we are, we're talking about these poor people in Gaza, and yet nobody wants to talk about the almost 1 million Jews that were kicked out of their lands and had everything confiscated after 1948. But that was God using that situation in order to fulfill his promise that he was going to gather all his people back to Israel. So you have this idea of Jewish superiority, but doesn't everybody else think that they're superior to? I mean, look at Islam. What does Islam mean? Islam means submission. You will submit to our God, or you will be taxed, you will be persecuted, and in many cases, you will die. You look at what's going on in Nigeria right now. Why are so many Christians being killed? All by Muslims. Every single Christian that is killed in Nigeria is by Muslim rampaging hordes. And they've got these tribesmen, these herdsmen, and they're walking around with machetes, and it's crazy. What happened in Congo a couple months ago, where about 70 Christians were herded into a church, and I think a lot of them were beheaded, actually, burned or whatever it was. I mean, it's just, so Islam is certainly supremacist. The only people that really don't have the whole supremacy ideology going for them today is the white Western male, because they have been beaten down over the past 15 to 20 years and told that they need to feel guilt for whatever, things have happened in the past. But you look at, like, for instance, the KKK. Why did the KKK exist, the Ku Klux Klan? Because of supremacy ideology, that whites are better than blacks. What was the whole slavery thing about in Britain and the United States with the black people? That the white skin color is better than the black skin color. Mormonism. Mormonism actually denigrates black people right in the Book of Mormon. This is why I can't understand how any black person could subscribe to Mormonism. Because it literally calls them, like, burnt people. But, we're going to change our packaging, and we're going to extend it out to the black people. But at the root of Mormonism, and Joseph Smith was a 33rd degree Mason. So Mormonism is Freemasonry. And it's racist. So this idea that Jews are uniquely evil because they have a supremacist ideology within some of the ranks is patently absurd. You go to China, Japan, and they are the most racist people on the face of this earth. The Chinese have an unbridled hatred toward white people, which is why so many of them are in the United States just waiting for the go-ahead right now to begin shooting. And they'll do it without any hesitation whatsoever. So, let's not castigate the Jews as being unique in that. Just last night, my family and I, we watched My Big Fat Greek Wedding. And you could tell very much that the father's mentality was that the Greeks were superior. There was this one verse where he's talking to his wife's fiance. He says, Ian says something to Costa, the dad, and he walks off and he says that, well, your people were swinging in trees. And he says this in Greek, my people were writing philosophy. This is superiority ideology. It's like we're better than you. That exists all over the world. So to say that's a uniquely Jewish thing, and therefore Judaism and Christianity have nothing to do with each other, is patently ridiculous. Second of all, most Jews of the world today have no idea that those verses are in the Talmud. It is only the ultra-Orthodox who really study the Talmud. So now what you have is you have a bunch of anti-Semitic people who are starting to post this stuff online, and you now can have this, quick indexing of anti-Semitic passages about Christianity. Sure, you can find them there. You can find them about the Gentiles. That doesn't mean all Jews hold to that view. Now, most Jews are wary of Gentile people, and as I said, rightly so. Because it's not as if we've had a hand extended to us, a friendly one over the years. The love of evangelical Christians for Israel and the support of Israel is something that Jewish people took a long time to really embrace. Because, well, what's the motivation? And to be honest with you, there are those who, within Christian circles, who support Israel for less than altruistic means. I asked one ministry, I had a conversation with the director a couple of years ago, and they support making Jews making aliyah, sending Jews back to Israel. And I said, well, do you witness to them? Well, no, not really. Well, why not? Well, because, we have a kind of an agreement that we don't want to offend. And, the land of Israel, of course, makes, they're not very open to ministries that proselytize. But if you want to give money and help our people return, that's fine. I said, well, then why are you sending unbelieving Jews back to Israel? And the answer is that, well, the scriptures say, and prophecy says that God is going to gather his people. And I said, so in other words, what you're telling me is that you believe that you're helping God fulfill his prophecy in order to usher in the second coming. That when all the Jews are gathered back to Israel, then you're going to have the 7-year tribulation period, and then you're going to have the return of the Messiah. So what they're doing is they're in fact expediting the second coming. So is it really about concern for the Jewish people, or are they trying to help God along? And I said, listen, God doesn't need your help. It says he's going to bring his people back. He doesn't need you to do it. Your job is to go preach the gospel. And I think that's where we ended things. So there are all kinds of people who do things with less than pure motives. And so to say that Judaism and Christianity have nothing to do with each other because there are some verses within the scriptures that denigrate goyim, I think is it's a straw man argument. Second of all, or third of all, wherever we add on that list, I don't even know at this point. But I also want to address some of these people that are making these arguments. Who is really beating this drum? Well, one of the biggest right now, two of the biggest right now are, of course, Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, two former darlings of the right. Because Tucker, while he was on Fox News, made a lot of sense. Since he went independent, not so much. Candace, while she was a professing Christian, used to make a lot of sense. And she was actually pro-Israel at one time. But since she got married to the Farmers, last name of her husband, and converted to Catholicism, she's gone completely off the deep end. And her unbridled hatred for Israel and all things Jewish is off the charts. There was not too long ago a dialogue between her on X, Twitter, between her and a Messianic rabbi. And she was basically saying, well, you can either be Christian or you can be Jewish, but you have to make a choice. So, first of all, who appointed her as judge of these things? Second of all, that is patently false. But I want to show you something about where Candace has kind of gone in the last little while. So let's see here. I'm going to share screen here. Okay. So here, watch this. There we go. And here.
You don't get to ask those questions. What's wrong with you, Mom? Why are you so scared?
Ever since she is hating on Israel, a curse came on her and she's not herself anymore. Do you think that Candace Owens is demonic oppressed? Comment below. Candace Owens.
Here, let's watch it again.
Today. Take a look. I think somebody needs to check on her.
You don't get to ask those questions. What's wrong with you, Mom? Why are you so scared?
That is not human. So, like this girl says, ever since Candace started coming against the Jewish people, she has manifested a demon. Like there's no way that she's trying to blame Israel for Charlie Kirk's assassination, and Tucker Carlson, or as many call him, Tucker Qatarlson, because he is actually literally funded by Qatar. Carlson at Charlie Kirk's memorial, 100,000 people in the stadium. And he got up there and he said that the Jews killed Jesus and they silenced Charlie Kirk too. I mean, he came pretty much right out and said it. But then when approached about it, he says, well, I didn't say that. And that is the classic definition of gaslighting. It's saying something and then denying what you said. So you've got these people, and there are many, many on the so-called Christian right that are so angry at Israel for what's going on. And it's wild. And you have to ask yourself, where is all this coming from? Well, I think we see with Candace where it's coming from. It's being driven. It's a spiritual issue. And the spirit of Haman and the spirit of anti-Semitism is rising in the world once again. And this is, you can't explain this naturally. There's a lot of people saying that Charlie Kirk was assassinated by Mossad because he was starting to turn against Israel and question things. Charlie Kirk never turned against Israel. There's a big difference between questioning some of the things that Israel does, between disagreeing with some of Israel's policy and turning against Israel. But that's what they have done. And so what they're doing is they're projecting it on Charlie. And the sad fact remains is that Charlie can't defend himself anymore. But Charlie was he was a dedicated Christian, and he was a dedicated supporter of Israel. You can support Israel without agreeing with everything that they do. You can support Israel and be adamantly opposed to certain policies because Israel is not following God. They don't, they don't believe in Yeshua, number one, although there are more and more who are believing every day. But there are things that are done that we can disagree with without turning against them. A lot of people are saying, well, Charlie was really starting to question October 7th. No, he wasn't. He always questioned October 7th, and so have I. There was very clearly a stand-down order on October 7th. It took 6 hours for the IDF to respond to an invasion on the most secure border in the world. And we have IDF soldiers who are rising up and saying that we were told no patrols during this time. 6 hours when it takes 45 minutes to go from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. Was that the Israeli government, or was it the deep state, or who was it that ordered that stand-down order? We don't know. But someone within the Israeli government allowed 1,200 of their people to be slaughtered in order to get this war going. Now, are the aims of the war wrong? I don't think so. Because that land belongs to Israel. They conquered it in war. First of all, it was given to them under the United Nations partition plan. Israel was for the Jews, and Jordan was for the Palestinians, the Arabs. By the way, there were no Palestinians. There aren't any. It's a made-up nation. And so the keeping of those people in Gaza was to be a thorn in the flesh, because when Russia invaded Ukraine after telling them you can't join NATO, this is part of the Minsk Accords back in 1991. So it was NATO that was breaching their agreement with Russia. But when Putin finally invaded Ukraine to stop the bombardment of primarily ethnic Russians in the Donbass region on eastern Ukraine, there were millions of Ukrainian refugees who left, and all kinds of countries around the world took them in. I mean, there's a church in Toronto, Ukrainian church, that I was speaking to, and they took all kinds of them in. There isn't one Palestinian refugee that's been taken in. And now they're starting to. I mean, Britain is taking them in. Good luck with that. But Britain is already a Muslim country anyway. But Egypt's not taking any in. Why? They're right on the border with them. Because, number one, they don't want them. They don't like them. And number two, they're more effective to be used as a tool, as a thorn in the flesh of the Jewish people to keep Israel busy and tired. Because if Israel's constantly distracted with these terrorist attacks from within, then it makes them less able to do what they did with Iran back in June. So for Israel to say that they want to ethnically cleanse Gaza, I don't think that it's necessarily a wrong thing, because that land was always promised to them, and those people don't belong there. They belong in Jordan, which was what the United Nations gave them. But it was the Arabs that launched the war in 1948 in order to wipe Israel off the map. Israel agreed to the partition plan. The Arab countries didn't. They told the people that were living in the land, and there weren't that many of them, they told the people, leave your homes. We're going to wipe these people out. You'll be able to come back in about 3 weeks. They lost the war. There's no way they should have, because Israel was vastly outnumbered. And what kind of army did they have? I mean, they were a brand new nation. And many of them had come back from the concentration camps. Yet the hand of God was upon them. They won the war against all odds. And now these people were displaced. And instead of absorbing them in, they said, no, we're going to leave them there in refugee camps, because they're going to be a thorn in the flesh of the Israeli people. And they have been. So for Israel to want to ethnically cleanse the land, that doesn't mean exterminate all the Gazans. It just means they need to be sent to where they should be. So of that, I don't really have much of a problem with Israel wanting to take the land back. They already won that in war. Gaza was managed by Egypt until the 67 war. And the 6-day war, Israel won. That land belongs to them. You need to go. Go find another place. How they did it, though, with allowing October 7th, with Israel having funded Hamas for years as a counter to the PLO and the PA, that's where they're wrong. So you can disagree with that without disagreeing with Israel, because if you were to choose, and the interesting thing is Patrick Bet David, who was a Syrian, he was from Iraq or Iran, I can't remember where originally, lives in the United States, has a big podcast. He was interviewing Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes, who is one of the biggest anti-Semites, he is a white supremacist. He, he's had public spats with Ben Shapiro and whatnot. And even he is coming out and saying that both Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens have completely lost the plot and they've gone off the reservation. He is saying Candace Owens' accusations that Israel killed Charlie Kirk are ludicrous. And this guy will find any excuse to criticize Israel. So when you have your own soulmates, as it were, your own anti-Semites criticizing you for how completely off the wall you have gone, you know that you're not anywhere close to the truth. And Patrick Bet David actually said to him, if you had a choice between living in a Jewish area or a Muslim area, where would you choose? He says Jewish, of course. So he recognizes that Israel is still a far more righteous country, and living amongst the Jews is far safer than living amongst the Muslims. Because Jewish ideology is peace-loving and about prosperity. Islamic ideology is about death and destruction. Islam is a death cult. Full stop. It loves death. Hamas has even said so. They said that every Palestinian that dies in the Gazan war is to our benefit. They've come right out and said it. Why doesn't the mainstream media talk about this? But here's the final point. What do the scriptures have to say about Judeo-Christian values? What does the Bible say about this? Is there any such thing as Judeo-Christian values? Well, the first question I have to ask all of you replacement theologians, because that's what you are, to say that Judaism and Christianity have nothing to do with each other is supersessionism. It means that Christianity has replaced Judaism. Now, keeping in mind that rabbinic Judaism and biblical Judaism are not the same thing. Rabbinic Judaism is infused with, there's all kinds of Kabbalah in there now, which is Gnosticism. There are, and it's openly admitted that there are Hindu concepts within Judaism. Many Jews now believe in reincarnation. Certainly in Kabbalah they do. So biblical Judaism, based on Tanakh and Torah, is different from rabbinic Judaism. Rabbinic Judaism is a works-based righteousness. Biblical Judaism was all about the sacrificial system and Leviticus 17:11, the blood needing to atone for our souls. Two separate religions. So to say that there's no such thing as Judeo-Christian values is assuming that rabbinic Judaism is what represents true Judaism. It doesn't. It's a false religion. It is a response to Christianity. And much of the Talmud is a response to Christianity. But if you think that the Jews are the only ones to blame for this, look at the Christians. Look at the church fathers. And if you haven't read my book, The Red Mark on God's Forehead, you need to read chapter 9. What do the church fathers have to say? And by the way, it goes way before Constantine, within the 2nd century. Let's look at what Paul was saying. Why did he write Romans 9, 10, and 11? Because anti-Semitism had already started to creep within the church a mere 30 years after Yeshua established the way through the giving of Holy Spirit. Why did he feel the need to say that, brethren, my heart's desire and prayer for them is that they may be saved? Why did he have to say that, for I can testify that they have a zeal for God, but not according to knowledge? Is everything that Israel does today right? No. Is everything that rabbinic Jews do today right? No, but it's certainly a lot better than what the Muslims are doing. You don't see Jews rampaging through various villages and beheading people and burning them in churches and stuff like that. Oh, well, you know, the IDF is destroying these churches in Gaza. Well, maybe there are churches that are getting destroyed in Gaza, and maybe there are some anti-Christian people within the IDF, but that is not the Jewish ethos. There may be bad apples within the lot, but it's not the whole batch. Most Jews would never even think of doing something like that. And so just because you've got a couple of extremists within the Israeli government does not mean that that's what all Jews believe. Second of all, what does Paul say? Romans 11. This chapter alone destroys any of these arguments. In Romans 11:1, it says, I say here, I'll even put it up for you. Okay. Here we go. I say then, God has not rejected his people, has he? The church has not replaced Israel, has it? May it never be, for I too am an Israelite, a descendant of Abraham of the tribe of Benjamin. God has not rejected his people whom he foreknew. Just because they rejected Yeshua doesn't mean that God has rejected them. Or do you not know what the scripture says in the passage about Elijah, how he pleads with God against Israel? Lord, they have killed your prophets and they have torn down your altars, and I alone am left and are seeking my life. Elijah was saying that all your people have rejected you. But this is the divine response to him. I have kept for myself 7,000 men who have not bowed the knee to Baal. In the same way, then, there has also come to be the present time a remnant according to God's gracious choice. But if it is by grace, it is no longer on the basis of works. Otherwise, grace is no longer grace. What then? What Israel is seeking, it is not attained, but those who were chosen obtained it, and the rest God hardened. Just as is written, God gave them a spirit of stupor, eyes not to see and ears not to hear, down to this very day. And David says, let their table become a snare and a trap, and a stumbling block and a retribution to them, that their eyes be darkened to see not, and bend their backs forever. But Paul goes on to say, I say then, they did not stumble so as to fall, did they? May it never be. But by their transgression, salvation has come to the Gentiles to make them jealous. Now, if their transgression is riches for the world, and their failure is riches for the Gentiles, how much more will their fulfillment be? But I am speaking to you who are Gentiles, insomuch as I am an apostle to the Gentiles. You who are not Jewish, pay attention to what I'm saying, because I magnify my ministry, he says. For if their rejection is reconciliation of the world, what will their acceptance be but life from the dead? But if the first piece of the dough is holy, the lump is also, and if the root is holy, the branches are too. But if some of the branches were broken off, and you being a wild olive were grafted in among them, and become partaker with them as rich root, with them of the rich root of the olive tree, do not be arrogant toward the branches, Candace, Tucker, and the multitude of other Christians out there who are denigrating Israel and saying that they are the cause of all evils in the world. But if you are arrogant, remember that it is not you who supports you, but the root supports you. Beloved, Paul says, do not be arrogant toward the Jewish people, because they are the root of your faith. There is such a thing as Judeo-Christian values. Where do the values of Christianity come from? It is from the Torah. Where do we get our system of morality from within the faith? It is from the scriptures. It is from the Hebrew scriptures. It is from the Torah. It is from the Ten Commandments. Those are Jewish commandments that God gave to the children of Israel so we could share it with the rest of the world. Where do the Moedim come from? We are going to be celebrating Sukkot starting Monday night. Where does that come from? Comes from Leviticus 23. Do not be arrogant, because if God did not, if he did not spare the Jews, he's certainly not going to spare you. And there are all kinds of people out there who are coming against Israel and hating them. Have they stumbled that they should fall? May it never be. If you are coming against it, and listen, this whole thing about there being no such thing as Judeo-Christian values, it is only one more attempt to separate the Jews from everybody else so that we could turn against them. It is only one more element of anti-Semitism. Judeo-Christian values are a thing, because without Judaism, there is no Christianity. The church fathers tried to separate them, make them two different things. That's why we now have Sunday worship instead of worshiping on the Shabbat. That's why we have Christmas and Easter instead of keeping the Moedim. It was their attempt to paint everything Jewish as being anti-God. It's time to write a book. Amen. I already have it outlined. My wife is trolling me here. Listen, if you're coming against God's people, and I'll end with this. What does it say? What does God say about how he's going to deal with the nations, the Goyim, the Gentiles who come against Israel? Joel chapter 3. For behold, in those days and at that time, when I restore the fortunes of Judah and Jerusalem, hello, I will gather all of the nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat, and then I will enter into judgment with them there on behalf of my people, my inheritance Israel, whom they have scattered amongst the nations, and they have divided up my land. If you, Mark Carney, Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron, Anthony Albanese, and every other idiot politician out there who just declared their support for a Palestinian state, They divided my land that I gave to my inheritance, Israel. They have also cast lots from my people, traded a boy for a harlot, and sold a girl for wine that they may drink. He is going to enter into judgment with those nations in the valley of Jehoshaphat. Moreover, what are you to me, O Tyre and Sidon, and all the regions of Philistia? Are you rendering me a recompense? But if you do recompense me swiftly and speedily, I will return your recompense on your head. Since you have taken my silver and my gold and brought my precious treasures to your temples, and sold the sons of Judah and Jerusalem to the Greeks in order to remove them from the territory, this is historical and prophetic. Verse 9, proclaim this among the nations, prepare a war, rouse the mighty men, let all the soldiers draw near, let them come up. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am a mighty man. Listen and come, all you surrounding nations, and gather yourselves there. Bring down, O Lord, your mighty ones. Let all the nations be aroused and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat. This has not happened yet, for there I will sit to judge all the surrounding nations. Put in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come tread, for the winepress is full. This is Revelation chapter 14. This is the grapes of wrath. Are there such things as Judeo-Christian values? 100% there are. And just because there are elements of Judaism today that have things that are unbiblical, God knew what he was doing when he brought his people back to the land according to the fulfillment of his promise in Ezekiel 36 in unbelief. And then it says that he will sprinkle clean water on them, and then he will bring them to faith. That is when Yeshua comes back, and they shall look upon him whom they have pierced and mourn as one mourns for an only son, and grieve as the grieving for the firstborn. To say that there is no such thing as Judeo-Christian values means that Christianity has no root, and therefore it is a made-up religion. So if this is something that you have subscribed to, you need to repent of it right now before the Lord brings you into judgment. So we've come to the end of our hour. I want to thank everybody who has joined us. Please like and share. And we will look forward to seeing you next week right here on the threshing floor. Shavua Tov and Chag Sameach as we celebrate Sukkot starting this week. Bye-bye.
I won't run from the crushing. I'll hold on through the pain. What I lose means nothing.
If you missed today's show or want to watch it again, or want to tell someone where they can watch this episode, go to lamnetwork.tv, where you can find this show and all the other live Lamb Show archives in the on-demand section of the website. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to tell someone about the Messianic Lamb Network.
I just wanna be your sanctuary, a dwelling place for grace and mercy. Keep sifting me till everything is on the threshing floor.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussions, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take a tour of the lamnetwork.tv website. I'm Darryl Weinberg, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.